$1 million. Not a number on a screen. A number nobody in your bloodline has ever touched. Not your mother, who cleaned hotel rooms in Tulsa for 22 years. Not your father, who drove a delivery route for a regional bakery until his back gave out at 53. Not your grandmother, who raised 4 kids on a check from a meatpacking plant and never once owned the house she lived in. You crossed 7 figures on a Tuesday in October, alone, at your kitchen table, refreshing a brokerage app at 9:41 p.m. No one called. No one knew. You sat there with the number glowing on the screen and felt something that wasn't quite happiness. It was closer to disbelief mixed with grief, because the first thought that came wasn't pride. It was, why couldn't they have had this? That's the part nobody warns you about. The money doesn't arrive clean. It arrives with everyone who never got to see it standing quietly behind it. You grew up in a 2-bedroom rental on Larkspur Avenue in Tulsa, Oklahoma. 4 people, 1 bathroom, a window unit that worked in maybe half the rooms. Your mother, Denise, worked the 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift at a Hampton Inn off I-44, then picked up cleaning jobs for 2 private households on Wednesdays and Saturdays just to close the gap between what the hotel paid and what 4 people actually cost to feed and house. Your father, Roland, drove for Hutchins Bakery for 19 years until the disc in his lower back herniated and the only jobs left for him paid $11 an hour standing on concrete for 10-hour shifts. You were 9 when you first heard the phrase, "we'll figure it out," in a tone that meant they wouldn't. You heard it again at 11 when the transmission went out on the family car and your mother walked 40 minutes each way to the bus stop for 3 weeks rather than touch the $600 sitting in a drawer that was earmarked for the gas bill in case it spiked that winter. There was never a moment where anyone sat you down and explained money. There were only the absences. The field trip you didn't go on, the winter coat that came from a church donation bin, the way your mother's face changed slightly whenever a bill arrived in an envelope she didn't recognize. There was no inheritance conversation in your house, no talk of investing, no 401k matching, no family lore about a great uncle who bought land in the right decade. Money in your house was binary. There was enough or there wasn't. Mostly, there wasn't. You didn't resent your parents. You understood, even young, that they were doing arithmetic you couldn't see, choosing between the electric bill and new shoes, between groceries and the copay for your sister's asthma inhaler. They weren't failing, they were under-resourced in a way that had nothing to do with effort. But you made a private decision around age 14, sitting on the front steps of the Larkspur house, watching your dad ice his back with a bag of frozen peas. Whatever this was, it was going to end with you. The first rule is one you didn't have language for until much later. Poverty isn't a personal failure passed down through bad decisions. It's a set of missing tools passed down through silence. Nobody in your family had ever been taught what a Roth IRA was. Nobody had ever been told that a $25,000 salary and a $25,000 salary with employer 401k matching are not the same job. Nobody had explained that credit scores were a language, and that not speaking it fluently cost you tens of thousands of dollars over a lifetime in interest rates alone. This wasn't stupidity, it was an information vacuum, generations deep. You didn't know this clearly at 14. You just knew you were tired of watching people you love work themselves into the ground for amounts that never moved the needle. You got your first real job at 19, a call center in Tulsa, $13.50 an hour. Inbound customer service for a regional insurance company. Not glamorous, but it came with something your parents' jobs never had, a 401k with a 4% match. You didn't fully understand what that meant. You just understood instinctively that free money attached to a paycheck was not something to leave on the table. You contributed the full 4% from your very first check. Your coworker Desiree, 22, sitting 2 cubicles down, asked you once why you were doing all that retirement stuff at 19. You didn't have a great answer. You just said you didn't want to find out at 50 what you should have started at 19. She laughed, not unkindly, said you sounded like someone's grandfather. You took it as a compliment. By 21, you had $4,200 in that account. It felt enormous. It felt like proof that the machine other people seemed to understand was actually not close to you. You'd just never been shown the door. At 23, you built your first real net worth spreadsheet on a Sunday afternoon. Partly out of curiosity, partly out of the same instinct that made you contribute at 19. wanting the real number, not that comfortable guess. Assets: $9,100 in the 401k, $2,300 in savings. A 2014 Honda Civic worth roughly $6,800. Total, $18,200. Liabilities: $14,300 in student loans from 2 years at a community college you'd left to work full-time. $1,100 on a credit card. Total, $15,400. Net worth, positive $2,800. It wasn't much, but it was the first time in the recorded history of your family, going back as far as anyone could remember, that someone in your bloodline had more assets than debts. You sat with that for a long time. You didn't tell anyone. It felt too small to announce and too large to keep entirely to yourself, so it lived in a strange private place, a number only you knew, a milestone with no audience. The second rule: the first dollar that breaks a cycle is heavier than every dollar that comes after it. Not financially heavier, emotionally, because that first positive net worth isn't really about the $2,800. It's about proof. Proof that the pattern wasn't permanent. Proof that whatever had kept your mother working 16 years past when her knees gave her trouble, whatever had kept your father standing on concrete until his spine quit on him, that thing was not a law of physics. It was a lack of access. And access, once you found the door, could be walked through. You started reading. Not luxury content, not get-rich material, just basic personal finance, index funds, the difference between a Roth and a traditional IRA, what compound interest actually does over 30 years if left alone. You moved your savings into an S&P 500 index fund at 24, $50 a week, then $100, then more as raises came. Boring, unremarkable, completely transformative over time, in the quiet way most real wealth is. Between 24 and 29, you lived in ways that would have looked from the outside like nothing was happening. You drove the same Civic until it had 187,000 miles on it. You moved twice for marginally cheaper rent. Once to a smaller one-bedroom, once to split a two-bedroom with a coworker named Jalen to cut your housing costs by 40%. You took a second job for 14 months doing weekend data entry for a logistics company. Not because you were desperate, but because every extra $600 a month went straight into the index fund instead of evaporating into lifestyle. Your sister, Tamika, asked you once why you never seemed to do anything fun. You told her you were doing something. It just didn't look like anything yet. She didn't fully understand. That was fine. You weren't doing it to be understood. By 28, your net worth crossed $61,000. By 29, after a promotion to team lead that bumped your salary to $58,000, it crossed $94,000. You remember the exact night it crossed $100,000, a Thursday, 11 months before your 30th birthday. You were sitting on the floor of your apartment because the couch had a spring poking through it you hadn't gotten around to fixing. You looked at the number for almost 10 minutes. You thought about your dad icing his back with frozen peas. You thought, this is for both of us, even though he doesn't know it yet. The third rule is the hardest one. Crossing the threshold your family never crossed doesn't feel like arrival. It feels like grief wearing the costume of success. Because once the number gets large enough to matter, you start doing math you didn't ask to do. You start calculating what your mother's life would have looked like with even a fraction of what you now have. What if she had $30,000 in savings the year your father's back gave out? What if there was a cushion instead of a cliff? You can't go back and give her that. The money you're building doesn't reach backward. It only reaches forward. And learning to sit with that, the asymmetry of finally having tools nobody handed you in time to help the people who needed it most, is its own kind of weight that no spreadsheet prepares you for. You started sending your mother $400 a month when you hit $150,000 net worth. Not because she asked, because you could, and because some part of you needed the gesture more than she needed the money. She tried to refuse it the first 3 months. Then she stopped trying. By 31, with consistent contributions, 2 modest raises, and roughly 7 years of uninterrupted compounding in the market, your accounts crossed $610,000. You remember sitting with that number too, though by then the ritual had become familiar. The quiet check of the app, the absence of anyone to call. At 33, after inheriting a small amount from your grandmother's passing, $40,000, the only money that had ever moved backward through your family instead of forward, money she'd quietly saved from decades of meat packing plant checks nobody knew she had been setting aside in a savings account at a credit union 3 towns over, your net worth crossed $1,020,000. You found out on a Tuesday, refreshing the brokerage app at 9:41 p.m., sitting at the same kind of kitchen table your mother once sat at doing entirely different math. You sat in a 1-bedroom apartment that nothing about its appearance would suggest belonged to a millionaire. No new car, no different furniture, the same chipped mug you'd been drinking from since your 20s sitting next to the laptop, a crack running along the handle you'd meant to replace it for and never add, because replacing a $4 mug had never once felt urgent enough to interrupt the contributions. You didn't call anyone immediately. You sat with it, let the number exist privately before you gave it to anyone else, the same way you'd let $2,800 exist privately 10 years earlier. The first thought wasn't pride. It was, why couldn't they have had this? The second thought, arriving slower and quieter, was the one that actually mattered. They didn't have it, but because of what they sacrificed and what you build on top of it, the people after you would. The fourth rule is the one that gives the whole thing its shape. Breaking a cycle isn't a single moment. It's 1,000 boring decisions that nobody's there to witness, compounding quietly until one day the number on a screen says something your family's entire history said was impossible. You called your mother the next morning, not to announce the number. That part still felt too strange to say out loud, even now. You called to ask if she wanted to retire early, to tell her you could help make that math work in ways that didn't exist when your father's back gave out and there was no cushion under him, when the only options were concrete floors and $11 an hour and a body that eventually said no on its own terms instead of his. She was quiet on the phone for a moment, long enough that you almost asked if she was still there. Then she said, "You were always a serious kid. I just didn't know what you were being serious about." You told her the truth. You hadn't always known either. You'd just known, sitting on those front steps at 14 with a bag of frozen peas and the wrong job market and the missing information, that whatever this was, it was going to end with you. And it did. Your sister, Tamika, is 26 now, the same age you were when you sat with that first net worth spreadsheet showing positive $2,800. You've already had 2 real conversations with her about index funds and employer matching, sitting at her own kitchen table with your laptop open between you, walking her through the same Roth IRA breakdown nobody ever walked through with you. She's already 3 years ahead of where you were, already contributing, already tracking the number, already understanding it as a tool instead of a mystery. The cycle didn't just end with you. It started over in the other direction, with her. And somewhere down the line, with whoever comes after her, the silence that once defined your family's relationship with money will be the one thing that never gets passed down ever again.